Welcome back to The Globe on SABC News. Well, the Rand, as President Cyril Ramaphosa appointed former Central Bank Governor Tito Mboweni as Finance Minister, seemed to firm. The move seemed to soothe markets after a few days of uncertainty, with the Rand firming over % to around 14 Rand 68 cents against the dollar after the announcement. Bank stocks were also firmer towards the end of trade. To unpack all of this, we are now joined in studio by the CEO of Lehumo Investments, Maudi Lentsoane, and Dr. Dennis George, General Secretary for Federations of Unions of South Africa, FEDUSA. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us and a very good evening. Now, South Africa has had a number of finance ministers. We've seen over a short period of time 4 finance ministers in the last 2 years. Let's speak about the Rand and bonds reaction to the appointment of Finance Minister Tito Mboweni today.
Yeah, it's not only just the changing of the finance ministers, but South Africa is also lumped with the other emerging economies like, Russia, Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, and so forth. And obviously when the President of the United States also starts tweeting, it creates more anxiety. And then it's the issue of the trade war that has been exercised against China. So all these particular emerging markets lumped together create a lot of global uncertainty. But also in South Africa, we create a double whammy because we also create our own uncertainty. And I think that's what's happening. But at least it seems like the Rand has started to stabilize at the moment with the appointment of very experienced Tito Mboweni, who was first the Minister of Labour and then went on to become the Governor of the Reserve Bank. And during that period, it was very important to look at price stability from a point of view of low inflation. Because remember, the workers, when they start to negotiate, they always use the inflation numbers and then to start benchmarking what do they want to get. So if they will take inflation plus 2% or inflation plus 1% for a salary increase, because that is how they protect themselves against price increases. Because nobody wants super high inflation, because that will just kill the poor.
Now, do you think Minister Mboweni has the credibility? Dr. George has just mentioned the fact that, yes, he was Labour Minister and he was the Reserve Bank Governor, and he seems to have a handle on relations with, the World Bank, the IMF. And do you think this is good for South Africa at this point in time?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is, good for South Africa. He's the right man for the job. Just given the track record that he has, you've already alluded to the fact that he's been at the Reserve Bank for over 10 years, about 10 years. Since 2009, he ended, in fact, he spent about 10 years. I can't remember the exact years, but he was there for 10 years. So very, very experienced. And I think the man that at this point in time, he certainly comes with a bit of a balance. Firstly, the experience that he has in the job, but I think you also needed somebody who, has some kind of the willpower. That finance ministry is a very, very tricky position, especially if you don't have that. I mean, there were a number of people saying, why not take the DG from inside? But I think also you need somebody who will be able to say to the other ministers, I don't have money for you, and we are prioritizing on these other things, and that requires somebody to have that political capacity.
Now, Dr. George, the National Treasury is facing a major challenge, another challenge of credit downgrades under a collection of the taxmen, and its first recession since 2012. Now, do you think that Minister Mboweni will be able to deliver a sound midterm budget speech with all these challenges that the country is facing?
Yes, I must tell you a short story. When Tata Madiba was still president, he told us, he said, my ministers come to me and complain about the finance minister and the finance minister this and the finance minister that. And he said to them, what, the finance minister also cut my budget. So no use you complain to me about that. So what I'm trying to say, and this is what my colleague was trying to explain, you need a finance minister that can assert his authority, that can explain to people, look, it's now time that we must get more for less. In other words, the money that we spend must be spent wisely because it's taxpayers' money. And when you deal with fiscal policy, you want to stretch that money as far as you possibly can. What happened in the last few months and the last few years that we had state capture, we saw the looting of the state enterprises. And what we had further on top of that, we had companies that belongs to us, like SAA and Eskom and Nyal. They all come and say, look, we need a bailout. Now, I mean, that is what really upset the public in South Africa, that you have a fiscal policy that is totally out of control, and you don't have a finance minister with credibility and backbone that can tell his people, look, go and make more with that little money that we give you. So that is the most important thing for the finance minister in this time. But also the reprioritization in terms of what do we want to do now, what is the big priority. And for us, the big priority is the poor, and the big priority is the jobless. And what the president done, he had a job summit with the social partners, which have bought into all this. And now he's focusing on getting the investment into the countries at the end of this month. So during this period of us adjusting the economy and working together, I think we're going to be able to pull this one through.
Mr. Nhlanhla?
No, I totally, concur. Summed it up very well. You know, we are at the juncture where we cannot, things are wrong. There's so many things that are certainly wrong, and we need to turn things around. The economy is not growing, and for us to be able to do that, we've got to make all these very difficult decisions that have to be made.
Now, with the announcement of Finance Minister Tito Mboweni, we saw, banking stocks closed more and then on 1% firmer. Is this the beginning of a recovery that South Africans have been hoping for? And as you mentioned, we need a lot of investment in the country. The president is on a drive of 100 billion within a short space of time. Is this the beginning towards that step?
Yeah, look, I think like my colleague already mentioned, the challenges with our rand and the currency is very multi-dimensional. You've got on the one hand, the challenges that we have ongoing in the world. The stock market is under pressure. Lots of currencies, emerging market currencies, are under a lot of pressure. Given what is happening in the U.S. The U.S. is growing. The non-farm payroll came through. The unemployment is below 4%. This is an economy on the front footing, and you've seen the yields out in the U.S. now about 3%. And money is leaving emerging markets and unfortunately moving into the US. And these are some of the challenges. I think for that, we've got that negative that will always remain. But of course, we've got to grow our own economy, take care of, despite all those challenges, still be able to grow our economy. If we're not growing our economy, we're not going to be able to be able to see the recovery that we need.
Now, Dr. George, one of his first tasks will be delivering the midterm budget speech. And now this is a very short time frame with regards from the time that he has to bring himself up to speed. Do you think that the new minister will be able to give a detailed stimulus package, that was announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa last month to rescue the country's ailing economy, considering that he has a short space of time? This was supposed to be done by former Finance Minister Nene. Not
really. Look, our National Treasury operates is totally different because we do this every year. So there is a long track record in terms of, what we want for the immediate future in the medium term, that we want to spell out the expenditure, because remember what is looking at is expenditure. But also what is very difficult for us and uncertain is the situation in SARS. Because, SARS is supposed to bring in that money into the economy. And what we had last year was to see that there was a shortfall of 50 billion. And then the Minister of Finance had to introduce a 15% of that. So they increased about 1% to make up for the shortfall. And the other money we had to go and borrow. So what we are trying to do is to stabilize our fiscal side of the policy. Currently under monetary policy, the Reserve Bank have been playing its role to anchor, the interest rates without, putting additional, because they can also start putting up interest rates. Then we're going to get a double whammy. So what we are saying is this: we're expecting a medium-term budget policy statement to be delivered within the current situation, but will also spell out some future for us that we can look forward to.
Now, Maudi, credit rating agencies viewed the growth of the economy at about 1.8% for 2019. Now, compared with 2.2% that was projected earlier, Do you see President Ramaphosa's administration achieving this target with Finance Minister Tito Mboweni at the helm?
The growth rate definitely not going to be achieved. You know, they've already alluded to the fact that they're not going to achieve that. It was a very ambitious, I think, target that they had set, you know, for themselves. But you know, the reality is we're not going to be able to achieve the 3% that the president was looking for 2018. But you know, because of a number of challenges that I've already mentioned. I mean, the Ramaphobia that we began the year with, evaporated into the skies, and we now sit with the reality of the fact that there are a number of challenges that we've got to take, and it's going to be a very painful process to try and really turn the economy around. But certainly, the positive things is that he's done the right things. You know, he's taken actions where he needed to take actions, and I think it's a foundation that can only, you know, see our economy on the right footing going forward.
Gentlemen, do you have something to say?
Yes,
Dr. George, very quickly, we have run out of time.
I concur. The issue the rating agencies ask us, where is growth going to come from?
Where is growth going to come from?
It's going to come from the agricultural sector, it's going to come from mining, it's going to come from manufacturing. What we need to do is to provide the support measures to make sure that we can turn this economy around.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And that was Maudi Lentsoane, CEO of Lehumo Investments, and Dr. Dennis George, General Secretary of Federations of Unions of South Africa, FEDUSA, joining us live in studio. Time now for a quick break. More news when we return on The Globe. Stay with us.